Thank you for your introduction. Just call me Sunny. It's very hard for American to pronounce my first name, Zhe. That means philosophy. I was made in China, assembled in both China and United States. I went to Fudan University in the 80s. Then I taught at Fudan in Shanghai for 7 years, and Tsinghua University, University in Beijing, for 10 years. I run the Center for U.S China Relations there. What I'm trying to do tonight is trying to tell you who is Xi Jinping, what happened in China right now, why it's relevant to American to your life. So here I have a three-part of my presentation. Maybe I should come here, otherwise I cannot see. And what I'm trying to tell you that my arguments in a more fluid and volatile international context, that China is shaping the world by changing itself. And also Chinese leaders possesses both domestic aspirations and a global consciousness. And also, since taking office in 2012, the current leader, Mr. Xi Jinping, has set out a vision for China, the Chinese dream. It's the big slogan. And in the past 5 years, Xi Jinping has accumulated much power and revised the constitution, and has fundamentally changed China. So you read the news, you know what happens in China. And so the first part, I'll go over, give you brief review of what he has accomplished at home, and what are his future ambitions to remake China in the future. And to what degree has China's domestic transformation contributed or hindered its open door foreign policy. Then I'll use the case of U.S. China Relations to show that whether or not the rise of China is a fantasy or fallacy, the U.S. China Relations illustrate, that China has become a stronger force in the status quo, and both contributing to and destabilizing the international order. I met Larry Summers a couple of weeks ago. He had shared with me his observation. He says China is an amazing country, the both beauty and the beast. So over the last 40 years, China began to open up its door in 1978. December 15, 1978, Deng Xiaoping decided to establish diplomatic relations with the United States. That symbolized China will open door to the Western world. 3 days later, December 18th, and he had a vision. He began the third plenary session of the third party Congress opened. So that means symbolize China began to domestic reform. So domestic reform, open door policy, intertwined, go together. So they're going to celebrate this year, because it's 40 years already. So Summers' observation is how comes countries with the average GDP per capita income, it's only 22% of the American per capita income. So right now the average Chinese, the official data is probably $8,000 US. Right? But American, maybe 50,000, whatever, 56 in Manhattan, who live in Manhattan. So. But only 22% of the per capita income, but the country accumulated such wealth. I have a data here. Last year, 2017, the Chinese GDP is probably about 12 trillion US dollars, 12, 13 trillion US dollars. Americans' GDP last year is about 17, 18 trillion US dollars. He predicted, generally estimated, China will keep on going. So in about 3-4 years, the phenomenon, symbolic GDP will surpass the United States. So Kishore, one of the political scientists who is the dean of Singapore Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and he made the argument. He said none of the American politicians realized, dare to say one day in terms of GDP, symbolic modernization, the United States can become number 2. So this is the point is on the the beauty part from Chinese perspective, they really made huge progress. And also unemployment rate is probably 4 or 5%. Some new sectors like e-commerce and online financial services are gaining momentum. For example, recently the young people, the Chinese people, talking about TMD versus BAT. BAT is a Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. People use WeChat, to communicate, but now these are the considered older companies, founded probably around year 2000. BAT, right? Baidu is a Chinese version of Google, right? People search information, using Baidu. Because Google is blocked in China, so most of Chinese citizens cannot log on Google. But the TMD, T means Toutiao. It's a news company. It tells you about almost like a New York Today, news companies, and founded by a young guy, 35-year-old, and registered 5 years ago. After 5 years, the total value of the Toutiao is about 30 billion US dollars, right? And M is Meituan, is the small companies delivering food. You order food, you order whatever and they deliver, send the local guys to send to your door. Whatever you order, so it's very convenient, worth 30 billion US dollars. Didi is the Chinese version of Uber, so it's also 30, 40 billion US dollars. So young guys, founded these companies, 3 companies. So people talking about how can I become so rich, how can I become so innovative, right? And run my own business like that. So if you go to Beijing, some students still talking about politics, U.S. China relations. But if you go to Shenzhen, go to southern part of the country, so people are talking about setting up, how to register a new company, how to do business. The best part of the Chinese economy. So what I listed here, there's a lot of remaining challenges. For example, what I call the first 3 large inequality gaps remains. People live in the city, people live in the countryside, farmers earn different. On the coast, people live in coast area, interior, western part of the country. We call it the 5 part of the country: the coastal area, middle, central area, and the western part of China. So these people have different living standards. And the urban middle classes and disadvantaged groups. And so for those people, if you follow the news, you see the people who help the Shanghai to clean the street, they began to go. They are going on strike right now because they earn less money. The benefit are cut down. So those are considered disadvantaged groups, social groups. Second, the big challenge for Chinese economy is, I think, the aging populations. That by, I think, the estimated, in about 25 years, there are probably over 400 million people. They'll be 65-year-old or older. So that means the government have to provide a lot of benefits, pensions, increase, whatever. And the third problem for Chinese economy is the lack of openness of its economic system, and also the issue of competitiveness in economic dependence on high capital spending and the expansion of the credit. For example, the Chinese SOEs, state-owned enterprises, generally didn't perform that well. So that's the problem. That's 3 challenges. So what the new government, new administrations, Xi Jinping and his team is trying to do in the future, they set up a 3-stage developmental plan from this year, 2018 to 2049. 2049, China will celebrate centennial, 100 years founding of the People's Republic. The first stage, 3 years, from 2018 to 2021. 21, it means the Chinese Communist Party founded in 1921. So the first party will celebrate itself, So the leader says we'll double the per capita income from USD, people making $600, $700 to $1,200. Very concrete, transforming China into a developed nation. So probably in about 3 years, China will say, oh, I'm already a developed man, I'm already developed nation. And the second stage to 2012 to 2035, and moderately prosperous society. So here they have, I'll give you an example, Made in China 2025 plan. That plan is very concrete, recommended advances in technology, specifically big data, AI technology, clean cars, so these kind of things. So the plan prioritized 10 sectors, including automated AI, I said, tools and robotics, aerospace, these kind of things. So that's the second stage. Third stage is from 2035 to 2049, and trying to build up China as a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, and harmonious and beautiful. Beautiful means they need to clean air. They need to get rid of the pollution issue. These are the paper plans, so they set up by the 19th Party Congress last year. And but however, you have a wonderful goals, but you have to get over there, So the roadmap is something they will begin deal with three pricing issues. They call it three battles, economic battles. The first, they have to deal with financial risks because the debt is too high. And secondly, they have to deal with the poverty issues because 43 to 45 million people still continue to live on less than $1 a day. So that's the poverty issue there. And also I mentioned the aging population. And also the last battle, the outline, they will begin with the pollution, deal with pollution issue. So these are the three pressing issues the government trying to work. And so that's basically the big picture for the economic change, what happens over the last 5 years. Political dimensions, Xi Jinping consolidated his power and put his own thought of socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new area. Officially included in the party constitution. So who is Xi Jinping? I studied him. I think he has a revolutionary DNA. His father was a well-known revolutionist, helping Chairman Mao build up the new China. But he was purged. His father was purged in 1962. So Xi Jinping at that time was only probably 12, 13 years old, and he suffered. He suffered, he went to the countryside. But how come this guy suffered, his father suffered from the Cultural Revolution, purged by the party, but still he became the highest leader of the Communist Party. He want to remake the party. So this is some kind of a DNA, talking about legacy of revolution. And also he has a 22 years of working experience in Fudan province, in coastal area of China. He was a party boss in Zhejiang province. He was party boss for half a year in Shanghai, and then he was promoted at a very quick speed, to become the #1 boss in China. So a lot of people see Xi Jinping a different way. Some people see pessimists see Xi Jinping as a strong man, a dictator. Especially see American media, liberals call him a dictator, new czar, in China. And optimistic, see Xi Jinping as doing what is necessary to neutralize hardline conservatives so that he has a means to implement much needed reform. So we have a different opinions, even as a political debate in China, liberals and conservatives. So let's see what he has accomplished, what he has been doing over the last 5 years. And I summarize in what he has done over the last 5 years in 3 political battles. First battle is Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. Was unprecedented. Crackdown on both tigers, big corrupted government officials, senior leaders, and flies, and they call low-level bureaucrats. So more than 1 million government officials, including more than 150 civilian officials with the rank of vice minister and above, more than 90 military officers with the rank of a major general and above. They were arrested. 6 state leaders have been arrested. So including some of these members of the political bureau members, right? And so these campaigns extremely popular among Chinese people. I think it's actually, in practical sense, alienated some of the elites and paralyzed the governing body at the lower level, because these government officials used to take bribes, and they lost incentives to continue to work. So how do you deal with this problem? And then there was sweeping institutional change. He's trying to improve the party governing efficiency by shaping up vested interests among agencies. For example, he set up National Security Council, follow the American model, set up a new agency to deal with, the military veterans, and to deal with some other immigrants, because a lot of Chinese people going abroad, how do you protect the overseas Chinese interests? They set up a new Bureau of Immigrations, and also I think another trend is parties trying to control over society, right? So the party has probably close to 90 million members. 90 million members of the party, right? Has sought to further embed itself across layers of Chinese society and economy, and he has done so by silencing dissent. So the people just cannot have your voice. Basically, when you have a dinner, you have meeting friends, you can criticize government. You can criticize government officials, but very hard for you to publicize, to write articles on newspapers, do the TV interviews. So that's a problem. So, the censorship, for example, as I said, Google and some other Facebook, blog, so this is a problem. The government has to think about how do you reopen the society. For many countries, it's difficult to manage the balance between, doing what is popular at home, anti-corruption efforts, whatever, and doing what is right for the international community. China is trying to seek Western recognition and respect of the Chinese political system and Chinese model of development. So Xi Jinping trying to legitimize himself, right, in the international society, trying to get support. So that is number one goal. So you need to have some kind of international legitimacy to justify you are doing right. People talk about the Chinese soft power. Confucius Institute built up more than 60, 70 Confucius Institutes here in the United States, trying to help people to understand the Chinese culture, to understand Chinese development. And the expansion of China's diplomatic frontiers, people usually ignore that. But Chinese government call it commercial diplomacy, economic diplomacy, cyber security, space competition with the United States, with Western countries, polar exploration, this kind of thing. So there are new frontier, so China, new goals for Chinese foreign policy. What I call a great leap forward modernization of defense forces. The defense forces usually, the United States spend, I think it's probably $600 billion US a year, for the defense spending. China is about last year about 150. So it's the percentage is, in Chinese GDP is about 1.5%. So some people still argue the Americans spend maybe 2%. Most of country, President Trump asked NATO to spend. EU countries spend maybe 2% of their GDP on defense. So the Chinese argument, counter arguments, we only spend 1.5. So trying to make up, trying to let people have more benefit. So soldiers have more benefit. So this is one of the counter argument. Peaceful development by elaborating the idea of the cooperative win-win situation in international relations. Then he prioritized 3 functional areas as a focus of Chinese foreign policy. This began about 5 years ago and will continue. First, he's trying to work out a better relationship with the United States. Number 1, top priority, to work with the United States. Secondly, the more public diplomacy and people-to-people exchange program. That's why people call it a soft power increased. And the third, China's maritime security right. So that's why you see what happened in South China Sea. There are new military drills. It's going to happen in a couple of days in South China Sea. So you'll see American media will reflect that, criticize Chinese maneuver of this show the muscles. And also he's trying to work out a good relationship with some other developing countries. That's why, I'll give you an example, the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Bank, and the Belt and Road Initiatives, China trying to go west, go to Central Asia, trying to build up a bridge, between China and Europe. China is trying to work Russian. So this initiative brought up maybe about 3-4 years ago, and actually I think it's a reaction to American strategy rebalancing Asia, pivoting to Asia. I think that China thought, I'm eating my dinner here, so this guy coming, they want to sit here, so I don't want to have a direct confrontation with you, so I go west. I'm leaving. So this is a forced choice. Right? So this is very interesting. Become a national strategy. So this is an overview of the Chinese foreign policy. A lot of challenges, but on U.S. China relations, we use a lot of words, terms talking about the U.S. China relations. People, invented the G2 concept. The United States and China are 2 engines of one big Boeing, airplane. So you have to work together, otherwise you cannot fly high. So this is the one metaphor. Another metaphor is the invisible G2. So only the United States and China can play a big role in the future to shape the world. And so the idealists see that we should have a synchronized swim. You raise your arm, I respond, to beautify the relationship. And some other people, one book called Sinbad, Different Dreams by Mike Lepton, talking about, we have a lot of shared interest. We're supposed to work together. But however, we simply can't because of different interests, different desires, passions, different leadership. President Trump is unpredictable, so some Chinese leaders are aggressive, whatever, so different reasons. So that leads to another predictions, a fight of the century, you see the trade war, so this kind of thing. But actually, historically, China has seen the United States as either paper tiger in 1950s, because we fought it in Korea, right? In Vietnam in 1960s, but the real Chinese, the 美国, a beautiful country, 美帝, I would call it a beautiful country, but a beautiful imperialist in Chairman Mao's word. Beautiful imperialist country, 美国, 美帝, right? So it's very interesting. It's a contradiction of a mixed feeling towards the United States, a love-hate syndrome. You feel the natural affinity, easy to talk, easy to approach, no problem working with them. But when you talk about the political system, usually most Americans don't like that kind of system. They think that's a closed system, not open enough, right? No democracy at all. So in 1980s, however, a students' movement, Tiananmen, what happened in Tiananmen Square in '89, basically Chinese students see the United States as a role model for their development. They put up a Statue of Liberty on Tiananmen Square. So that is the change of perception, because China and the United States set up diplomatic relations in 1979. So in about 10 years, you see China have very favorable attitude towards the United States. But after Iraq War and the 2008 financial crisis, the first after two wars, Iraq War and war in Afghanistan, a lot of Chinese media argue that United States is a troublemaker. United States is bullying the Middle Eastern country. They ignore, to be fair, the actually after the Iraq War, the Americans suffers, and a lot of casualties, but the Iraqi economy began to pick up. So, but at that time, the media usually painted United States as a bullying power, as a troublemaker, And then after 2008 financial crisis, that impression switched to economic area. So we used to see the United States as a role model, right? American model, the role model for China to follow, right? Economic management. But now after 2008, the United States caused the international financial crisis. So China has to build up its own economic system. So that there are changing perceptions, right? So much of this American institutional, what I call the institutional attractiveness, has lost. A lot of Chinese, even they send their kids to study here, but they criticize, begin to criticize the United States. That's an awful situation here. I call it the complexity of the sweet and sour relationship, sweet and sour relationship. I define the U.S. China relations in 4 dimensions to be very quick. First, we have a very broad contact, people-to-people contact. Every year, over 5 million people to go back and forth, And I don't see much Chinese here in Charleston, College of Charleston. I would be I will be the advertiser, to encourage Chinese students to come, because last year, 140 million Chinese people go abroad. That the people come on time. Some people go several times a year, So 140 million. That's a lot, right? So I met a foreigner. First time he visited China is about 1980. He says, that time, no single Chinese citizen were allowed to go abroad as a tourist. So last year, it's 140 million. This is a huge change because those people are going back. They went to Paris, come to New York to shop, and they going back. So that is amazing change. So some Chinese people are confident about their system, but the government might overstretch its power right now. So broad contact, people-to-people exchange is doing good over the last 20 years. And we also have an extensive cooperation, for example, trade economics. And every year we have over 570 billion US dollars trade volumes. And talking about President Trump, talking about the put tariffs on the Chinese car, trying to sell to the United States. But China only sell very minimum, maybe 10,000, 20,000, I don't know, but the number is very, very low. The American company actually, Ford, GM, set up their factories in Shanghai, in some other provinces in China, and 400,000 pieces of GM made in Buick and sold in Chinese market. So if China impose tariffs on those joint ventures, Americans company will suffer as well. So that's a problem. When we're talking about the extensive cooperation, we also talk about mil-to-mil cooperation, military to military, because the two military actually sent two memos a year ago on trying to avoid conflicts on sea code of conduct. If your ship come here and I have to say hello, I don't be too provocative in like what happened in EP3 incident about 17 years ago in Hainan, American civilian airline, and was hit by the Chinese pilots, so it had to land it in Chinese Hainan island. We have a profound competition. IPR is an issue, intellectual property right. We have two countries competed in Asian, Southeastern Asia, and the military competition as well. And used to have a limited confrontation, but now I'm afraid this limited, we call it profound competition, right? Profound cooperation, but now I'm afraid the tendency is moving to profound or extensive confrontation instead, and limited cooperation. So that's the problem of what happened over the last 3 months. Trade war, the Americans signed the Taiwan Travel Act. The American government officials allowed to visit Taiwan. Something Chinese government officials very sensitive about that. So this is a general mixture of the relationship. And 4 key strategic dimensions I'll go over quickly. So I think both leaders, leaders in both countries, we need long-term visions. We need to think about what kind of relations you want to build up. Right? As I said in 1978, Deng Xiaoping was criticized by his colleagues. Why you want to work with this beautiful imperialist country, Meidi. So, and Deng Xiaoping says those countries who follow the United States got rich. The simple reason. He wants China to become rich country, prosperous country. So that's why he decided to build up a relationship. In 1989, when the United States imposed sanctions against China, after what happened in Tiananmen Square, Deng Xiaoping had another very short term, very well known. He said the U.S. China relations must be fixed. So he had a vision. And Xi Jinping has a vision as well, so at least from my readings. He said that there are 1,000 reasons to work out a good relationship with the United States. His daughter studied at Harvard, trained at Harvard, so he's, I think he told American president he loved to watch the American movies, this kind of thing. So no single reason to damage the relationship, right? So that's a vision. I think President Carter has a vision. Right? And also global context. Another dimension is that we have to work with Japan, Korea, North Korea, and definitely, Kim Jong-un is just visited China a couple weeks ago, and so China, North Korean relationship also had an impact on the U.S. China relations. And also domestic politics, and I'm wondering whether still a window of opportunities. I think as long as the two countries, focus on the domestic affairs. For President Trump, definitely he has a slogan, American first rhetoric. If you focus on domestic affairs, then there's still strategic opportunities to work with each other, because the only choice you have, you govern yourself better, right? And the crisis management, I think the urgent task, because we'll see the trade war will still have 3 months to negotiate. South China Sea crisis, Taiwan Relation Act, Travel Act, and also the Diaoyutao Sankaku Island crisis. These kind of issues need to be worked out. So we have some other issue areas, and don't have time, but basically go economic and trade issues, and democracy, human rights, mule-to-mule competitions. China and the United States are it's very strange. Two countries, the government always says we have to work with each other. To live with the United States is better for China. It's our rational choice, right? For Americans, same thing. China is a big country, you just cannot ignore it. You have to work out a solution. But two militaries actually see each other as a potential enemy. Right? Spend trillions of dollars, right, on the defense budget. So if we can save the money to put on infrastructure to build up more schools, I think that will be a wonderful thing. We two countries should have some kind of responsibility, do something regional and global security, right? And for example, Middle East, Korean issues. I think a lot of people are wondering what happened in any change in Chinese foreign policy towards North Korea after Kim Jong-un's visit. All I can say is the two bottom line of Chinese North Korean policies. Number one is China used to work with North Korea, right? Before it in 1950s. So right now or in the future, right? China doesn't want to turn itself into a direct enemy of North Korea, right? So because China's second point, bottom line is whatever China does, right, to sanction North Korea, right, or to support North Korea, China will work with United Nations. China doesn't want to give the world impression that I'm working with the United States together to sanction North Korea. So that is something I think China is trying to avoid. So that's two bottom lines. So you follow that logic, and you'll see China will probably try to fix the relationship with North Korea and provide some kind of minimum. Remind me, I have 3 more minutes. And to work with United States, or continue to work with the United States and trying to persuade North Korea to give up the nuclear programs. There are some lessons to be learned, to be transferred into the future. I think the relationship will continue to be mixed of cooperation and conflict. The task, the mission for us is to make the mix as possible, as positive as possible, right? So the key point we have to think about what role China seeks to supplant the United States at global level, to achieve overall parity with the United States, or play second fiddle to the United States. Whether China wants to replace the United States to be the number one country, to be the leader. Can China become a leader? I don't think so. I think it's better to stay as a number two, follow the United States, and see what happens. And also, I think Chinese policy towards the United States kind of, I don't criticize that much because, when President Trump send out tweeting messages, criticizing China, you see the Chinese government, the high-level leaders, Xi Jinping, the Premier Li Keqiang, kind of quiet, but the lower-level government show counter-argument, their counter-argument. That means, the Chinese trying to criticize the United States, but at the same time still insisting on developing a good relationship with it. And sometimes on trade issue, IPR, on some other issues, Chinese governments trying to fight over core interest, but they don't want to break the relationship. So that's over the past 30 years, 40 years, China is trying to follow the philosophy. So we have to work with China, no matter what kind of difficulty you have in the relationship, you have to fix it. That's Deng Xiaoping's philosophy. I think that's China insists on that policy. So overall, I think in the future, the Chinese policy towards the United States will be still the same. Strategically suspicious, economically hopeful, and practically uncertain over some issues, South China Sea, And what about American policy towards China? You think about it, probably the same. So the task is we have to avoid coalition. we have to work together. I think the longest journey is a journey inward. So two countries supposed to should focus on their domestic affairs, so govern itself better. So that's my conclusion.
My name is Nick. I'm a finance major here at the College of Charleston, and I'm a sophomore. You mentioned One Belt, One Road, the Made in China 2025 initiative, and the anti-corruption campaign, which are like three of, in my opinion, the initiatives recently that have had like the biggest economic effect on China. Which of those do you think have the biggest effect kind of moving forward for like China's economy as a whole?
I think this become a top priority of the Chinese foreign policy, but the problem is we don't have a data. For example, we have a lot of think tanks in China focusing on the Belt and Road, but if you ask how much China invested in Ukraine, Central Asia, they cannot provide you data. And instead, you go to Washington, D.C., I visit CSIS, one of the think tanks in D.C. They have a team led by Professor Kennedy, 6 or 7 assistants. They're trying to use Google Earth, trying to use data from World Bank, all their local data from Central Asia, they find out, over the last 5 years, One Belt, One Road really had some kind of impact because they study 2,000 projects. One border city called Horgos in Xinjiang province. 5 years ago, from the Google Earth, nothing there. A small village, kind of city, small city on the border. But after 5 years, China really built up the big market, a lot of buildings, and trying to do trade with, I think, Kazakhstan. So this is a CSS data shows that over the last 5 years on these 2,000 projects, some of them really get Chinese funds, but some others, for example, European countries, they think there's supposed to be two-way relationship. China wants to invest in the seaport in Greece, buying this kind of asset, setting up a joint venture. But these people, local countries, they don't want it. They want Chinese investment. They want the money. But don't bother me. I get the money, I make the decision. I'm supposed to make decisions. So that's very awful. I think put China into awful situation, right? So, but this will continue. China will continue. You see what happened in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and proved to be more successful because this is it's a big economic enmeshment or interdependence created. Right? Because once we trade together, then you can certainly avoid military competition.
My name is Chuck Crawford. I'm supply chain management senior here. I just want to briefly ask you about you mentioned the America First rhetoric, obviously that came up in one of your slides, and the general consensus, or the general point I took from you on that was that maybe China perceives that somewhat with respect in terms of being able to govern ourselves. Is there any point, either hypothetically, is there any level we could reach of the rhetoric that China would consider that a threat, or is that more so that you just consider us, United States, doing what we're doing for our benefit?
Give you an example. The present. I think most of the Chinese people have a very favorable, good impression when President Trump got elected. Some people, not like Democrats here, criticize him. Whatever Trump does, they always prove to be wrong. You see the power struggle, sex scandal, Russian spy gate, rumors, whatever. But a lot of Chinese think he's a business guy. Because it's published books, Art of the Deal. Think he can fix the United States. So at that beginning, people have a favorable impression. But then, so that's why last November when he visited China, he was treated like a king. He enjoyed himself. He visited Forbidden City, and Chinese leader Xi Jinping had a tea together with him. Xi Jinping trying to introduce the the history, Chinese history, tell him about who is the best emperor, great man in Chinese history. President Trump is very smart. So after listening for a couple minutes, he said, "You are the greatest in Chinese history." So he's smart. Make Xi Jinping happy, So don't report it. So, and I think then after 3 months, he began suddenly he began to trying to impose the tariffs, on China. So from his perspective, he has a reason, he's whatever he's talking about the trade deficit. You still study 800 billion trade deficit, maybe 40%, 35% from China. So you have to do something about it. But the problem is you cannot fix the problem in 1 day, right? In 1 year. So he's trying like something I want it now. You have to do something. So from Chinese perspective, if you have a problem, yeah, let's work together. So you have to talk in a secret way because China trying to send 2 messengers, vice premier levels, government officials to D.C. Trump didn't see them. Right? Trump says, "I want to see the result." If you want to see the result, you have to talk to them, right? So this is I think a lot of people in China begin to become so disappointed. The American first used to be thought as a good thing for China. China can take a right? Because you can watch more American movies. You can study what happens in Silicon, then you copy it in China. But now, I think this is the atmosphere, the social media, the reporting media has changed. But I think over the long run, because President Trump is unpredictable, he's tweeting out a message yesterday. So President Xi and we are very good friends. Even we have arguments on trade. We can fix it. So one day he said this, another day he said that. But I think Chinese media probably will follow. The problem is you have to seriously watch what President Xi will respond. I think he made an announcement yesterday that China is determined to open up more. China will open up education, Medicare, and financial services, a couple of sectors. Lower the tax rate, follow what President Trump did, So I think that shows China will compromise, right? Then you have 3 more months to negotiate, and then you'll fix the relationship. I'm afraid because Opium War happened because of the trade policy, right? Opium War and American Revolution has happened because of the British tax policy. So this is some people say trade is a separate issue, but I don't think so because sometimes it's very close to the interest, right? So this is simply I don't want the American see China as bullying United States. I met one American scholar. He's very tough. He says what he sees is China is trying to bully United States, and of course I don't want to see Chinese see the United States that way. Right.
I was wondering about the startup culture in China. So I know that big competition between the U.S. and China in computer sciences. Do you think that the Chinese higher education system promotes more innovation, or does the U.S. education system promote more innovation in computer sciences?
I used to work at Tsinghua University, one of the they call it China's MIT. So I really worry about the over encouragement of encourage students trying to build up your own companies. I think for undergraduate students, you have to take some core courses. You have to spend a couple of years in a serious way, right? One of the best high schools in China, they have a 400 high school graduate. Maybe 100 go abroad, studying in the States, in Europe. And another 100 you can get into Beijing University top, like Ivy League schools here. Then the other 200, they don't know. They go to second-tier university. So these people probably the best guy best students who will be encouraged to set up their own company in the future. Because I think who said that, so if you get a straight A at school, so, the best career is to become a professor. You are serious, And B-class students, run business, because C-class students run business or go become president of the United States, right? So, because Bush Jr., failed, so, and then he's good, he's smart, he doesn't care that much about rules. So I think C-class students, government policy, the general atmosphere is a lot of people want to start. In different cities, they have some kind of an incubating park, right? You can get loans, small loans from the government, but the government trying to get some kind of share, right? To get some kind of intellectual property, share your intellectual property. So the policies, I think, are good, but the problem is whether everybody is good to take the money, take the loan. Do you have the guts, right? Do you have the talent to be an individual entrepreneur?
Thank
you very much. Right? Thank you.